The mud of Northumbria presses against your cheek. It is gritty and freezing. You are King Aella, and you are face down in the dirt. But the chill you feel isn't just from the damp earth beneath you. It is an unnatural, stinging cold, a draft that you feel inside your own back. You attempt to take a breath, but the mechanics of your body have been altered. The air does not rush down your throat. Instead, you feel the sharp bite of the English winter wind hitting internal tissue that was never meant to touch the light of day. Your anatomy has been surgically rearranged. The protective cage of your ribs has been parted. The heavy weight of your lungs no longer sits within your chest. They have been drawn out. They rest upon your shoulders, shivering in the breeze. A pair of breathing, crimson wings. The sensation is absolute. It is a white-hot frequency that drowns out the wind. But you must not make a sound. Above you, the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok stand in judgment. They are waiting for a scream. If you vocalize this agony, you die a broken man. But if you endure this impossible violation in total silence, you enter Valhalla. You hold your breath. And the eagle spreads its wings. The image of the blood eagle is the ultimate Viking nightmare. It is a marriage of surgical precision and barbaric cruelty. But history books often hide a crucial detail that complicates the narrative. It might never have happened. For centuries, scholars have argued that this specific method of execution is a ghost story, a monstrous myth born from a translation error in skaldic poetry. The Old Norse sagas are notoriously cryptic, prone to metaphor and riddle. When the texts describe a defeated enemy being cut with an eagle, many historians argue it wasn't a manual for anatomical rearrangement. Instead, it was likely a poetic way of describing the aftermath of battle. To cut an eagle on a man's back simply meant leaving his corpse face down in the field, leaving him for the carrion birds, the ravens and eagles, to feast upon naturally. It implies the Vikings weren't surgical psychopaths. They were simply brutal pragmatists who left their enemies to the scavengers. However, we cannot dismiss the darkness so easily. Recent studies conducted by medical historians have re-examined the evidence. They analyzed the structural integrity of the human ribcage against the iron tools available in the 9th century. Their conclusion: it was physically possible. Using a heavy spearhead to sever the ribs from the spine, the procedure could technically be performed without immediately killing the victim, provided the blade did not puncture the lungs themselves during the separation. Whether it was a literal ritual or a mistranslated rumor, the utility remains the same. The mere whisper of the blood eagle paralyzed anglo-saxon England. Real or not, the fear of this violation was a psychological weapon, sharper than any axe. The gears of this atrocity were set in motion not on a battlefield, but in the dark damp of a Northumbrian dungeon. King Aella believed he had silenced a nuisance when he captured the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. In a final act of arrogance, Aella didn't just execute the Viking hero. He humiliated him. He cast Ragnar into a pit of vipers, watching as the snakes did the work of an executioner. Aella thought the problem died with the man. He was catastrophically wrong. In 865 AD, the horizon off the coast of East Anglia grew dark with sails. This was not the usual scattering of longships looking for silver and slaves. This was a geological shift in history. It was the Great Heathen Army, a unified invasion force unmatched in scale, led by the sons of the man Aella had fed to the snakes: Ivar the Boneless, Ubba, and Bjorn Ironside. To understand what followed, one must understand the Norse mind. In Viking society, vengeance was not an emotional outburst. It was a legal and spiritual obligation. A blood feud was a debt. It had to be paid to keep the scales of fate in balance. If a father is murdered, the sons do not mourn. They hunt. The army tore through England like a wildfire. They dismantled kingdoms and crushed resistance, but their eyes were fixed on one prize. They weren't just conquering Northumbria for land. They were coming for Aella. For a common soldier, A quick death by the axe is sufficient, but for the man who killed a legend, a quick death is an insult. The sons of Ragnar needed a ritual that transcended simple execution. They needed a statement. Aella required a departure from this world that was as slow, as painful, and as legendary as the man he had murdered. The blood eagle was not merely an instrument of pain. It was a transaction. To the modern mind, it is torture. To the Viking mind, it was a sacrament, a holy offering to Odin, the Lord of War. The eagle is Odin's bird. To inscribe its shape into the flesh of an enemy was to send a message directly to the halls of Asgard. It transformed a defeated king from a prisoner of war into a divine vessel. But to ensure the offering was accepted, the victim had to remain alive during the procedure. This required the executioner to be less of a butcher and more of a surgeon. The engineering of the act was frighteningly specific. The primary tool was likely the heavy Viking seeks, a single-edged knife, paired with a small hand axe. The practitioner would not hack blindly. The goal was structural separation. With clinical precision, the skin along the spinal column was opened. Then the axe was used to sever the costovertebral joints, the precise point where the rib meets the spine. This was the most critical moment. If the blade slipped inward, it would puncture the lung, causing a pneumothorax. That would grant the victim a premature, merciful death. The ribs had to be severed cleanly, one by one, while leaving the vital organs intact. To heighten the sensory overload, historical accounts suggest the use of saline irritants. The application of salt to the exposed cavity wasn't just for agony. It was a sterilization method. Ironically, it prevented the victim from passing out due to infection or shock too quickly. But the cruelty went deeper. There is speculation that the victim was administered a mixture of herbal stimulants, henbane or nightshades often used by berserkers. These compounds wouldn't dull the pain. Instead, they would force the body into a state of chemically induced wakefulness. The victim was denied the body's natural defense mechanism, fainting. They were chemically locked into a state of hyper-awareness. Forced to be fully present as their own body was dismantled in the name of a foreign god. The ritual begins with the incision, a long, deliberate line drawn down the center of the back, exposing the spinal column to the cold air. The skin is retracted, revealing the ivory architecture of the ribcage. At this stage, the victim is merely open. The true violation has yet to commence. The executioner trades the knife for the hammer and chisel. This is the stage of mechanical separation. The horror here is not visual, but auditory. The sound of the tool striking bone echoes in the silence of the execution ground. It is a dry, repetitive cracking sound. Snap, snap, snap. The ribs are systematically disconnected from the vertebrae. It is a slow dismantling of the body's structural integrity. The pressure is immense. The victim feels the reverberations of every strike traveling up their spine, vibrating in their skull. Once the cage is unlocked, the wings are formed. The ribs, now loose from their anchor, are forced outward. They are bent back against their natural curve. The chest cavity, once a sealed vessel, is now a gaping aperture. The body is turned inside out. Then comes the final, defining act. With the ribs splayed open, the executioner reaches into the thoracic cavity. He cups the lungs, warm, slick, and frantically inflating, and gently draws them out through the opening in the back. They are repositioned, draped over the protruding ribs. The victim is still alive. This is the art of the blood eagle. As the victim gasps for air, the lungs inflate and deflate on the outside of the body. The movement causes the rib wings to shudder and twitch. To the silent observers, it appears as though the eagle is flapping its wings, preparing for flight. It is a grotesque animation of life, powered by the dying breaths of a king who can no longer scream. The noise of the battle for York has faded. It is replaced by the heavy silence of defeat. You are King Aella, and you are on your knees. Your armor, the steel shell of your sovereignty, has been stripped away. You are shivering, but not from the cold. Through the smoke, you see him, Ivar the Boneless. He does not walk like a king. He drags himself like a broken thing. But as he looks down at you, you realize the terrifying truth. There will be no negotiation. There is no ransom heavy enough to weigh against a father's blood. You are not a prisoner. You are a canvas. The preparation is methodical. Before the final separation, they bring the salt. It is coarse, rough, and white. As they apply it to the open incisions along your spine, the sensation is not just pain. It is a chemical panic. It feels as though 1,000 tiny fires have been lit beneath your skin, cauterizing your nerves into a state of screaming wakefulness. The agony grants you a terrible clarity. You feel the weight of your lungs shift. They are pulled from their cavity to rest upon your back. You try to gasp, but the pneumatic seal of your chest is broken. The air hisses uselessly against the exposed tissue. Your world narrows down to the few inches of dirt directly in front of your face. This is the soil you swore to protect. This is the kingdom you killed to keep. As your vision grays, the irony settles in heavier than death. You threw Ragnar Lothbrok into a pit to erase him from history. But as you die, staring at the mud, you realize you have failed. You have not silenced his legend. You have been carved into his monument. The death of King Aella was not an isolated execution. It was a geopolitical earthquake. The blood eagle served as a gruesome billboard erected on the cliffs of history. The message sent to every remaining Anglo-Saxon king, to Egbert, to Alfred the Great, was crystal clear. We do not just kill those who harm our leaders. We unmake them. This act of psychological warfare shattered the resolve of the Northumbrian resistance. The screams of their king echoed longer than any battle cry. With the local leadership decapitated, both literally and spiritually, the Vikings did not just raid. They settled. York became Jorvik. The north of England was folded into the Danelaw, a vast territory under Viking rule that would endure for nearly a century. The ritual itself transcended the moment to become a dark staple of Norse literature. It appears again in the Orkneyinga saga, where Halfdan Longleg is subjected to the same eagle cut by Earl Einar. It became the ultimate narrative checkmate in the sagas, the designated punishment for those who broke the sacred codes of honor. Today, the shadow of the blood eagle still looms over our pop culture. From the visceral depictions in the TV series Vikings to the digital reenactments in video games, it remains the defining symbol of Viking brutality. It is the ultimate horror story, one that has survived 1,000 years to remind us that for the Vikings, vengeance was an art form, and the human body was merely the canvas. Does it matter if the blood eagle was real? Historians may argue over mistranslated verbs and the tensile strength of the human ribcage forever, but in the end, the distinction is meaningless. The blood eagle represents something far darker than a simple execution method. It represents the ultimate, terrifying intersection of art, religion, and torture. It is the moment where the human body ceases to be a person and becomes a symbol, a grotesque message carved in bone and breath. The existence of the story itself proves the point. Whether they were wielding the axe or merely the quill, the men who conjured this image understood the architecture of fear. War makes monsters of us all. The blood eagle forces us to admit that human creativity is often at its most potent when it is being used to destroy. If you have the stomach to peel back the layers of the past and uncover the dark rituals hidden in the footnotes of history, subscribe to the Scarlet Archives. Join us next time. We will leave the freezing winds of Northumbria behind for the scorching heat of ancient Persia, where a boat, some milk, and a pot of honey are not the ingredients of a feast, but the components of a living nightmare.